I'm doing a Great British Bake Off 2024 Bake-Along. Let's get into Autumn Week.
This week's signature bake, seasonal pies. Now, the day that I'm baking this is actually Halloween. And in my family, we always have pumpkin pie on Halloween. Now, for many, many years, I did not realize that this was a family tradition of ours and not something that everyone else typically did. And the reason for that is because my grandfather's birthday was on October 31st. And he didn't really like cake, but really loved pies. Hence, pumpkin pie on Halloween. So, in honor of my late grandfather, and because it's one of my personal favorite pies, I'll be making my family's favorite homemade pumpkin pie recipe. Let's get into it.
Now, any good pie starts off with a good pie crust. I always do shortcrust pastry for my pumpkin pie, which is super easy to make. All you need to do is add flour and salt into a bowl, and then cut in cold, unsalted butter until it resembles breadcrumbs. Feel free to use your hands a little bit at the end, but don't let the butter get too warm. Then add just enough ice water until it all comes together into a cohesive dough. The key here is to keep that butter as cold as possible, so I actually like to pop mine into the freezer after I cube it and use actual ice water, not just cold water. I actually made a double batch of pastry here since my husband wanted a batch of pie crust cookies, so I divided the dough in two, pressed it into a disc, wrapped it in plastic wrap, and then let it chill in the fridge for at least 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, the butter should be cold again, so it's time to roll out the dough. If you can, try to keep it relatively circular, and then once it's only a few millimeters thick, transfer it to a pie pan with the help of your rolling pin. Gently press the pastry into the edges of the pan, recentering it if you need to, and then cut off any overhang that's greater than about an inch. Don't cut off too much, as we do want a little bit, as we'll fold this over onto itself and then pinch the edge to create a nice crimped border. Now, if I were to truly recreate the pies I grew up with, this would be store-bought pie crust, which were not blind baked and therefore often a little underdone. So I do think my version is better, but my mom's pie will always have a special place in my heart. Love you, Mom. Anyway, I finished the crust by poking a few holes in the bottom with a fork and then popped it in the freezer. And then with the extra dough, I of course had to make the pie crust cookies I had promised my husband. Never let good pastry go to waste. At last, it was finally time to blind bake my pie crust using my trusty dried garbanzo beans and then move on to the pumpkin filling. So my family's super secret pumpkin pie filling recipe is what's on the back of a Libby's pumpkin can. This recipe using canned pumpkin is what pumpkin pie should taste like, and that is a hill that I'm willing to die on. I have yet to have a homemade roasted pumpkin pie that comes anywhere close to this, which is mostly because, fun fact, the variety of pumpkin used for canning is not what you can also buy in the store. So it's gonna taste different. If you have a strong feeling either way, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, enough about that. I poured the pumpkin filling into the crust and then very carefully popped it back into the oven to bake for about an hour. It was done when the filling still had a slight jiggle, but a knife in the center came out mostly clean. And that's the finished pie. I let it cool to room temperature and then popped it into the fridge to chill overnight. The next day, because this is a Great British Bake Off challenge, it was time to decorate. So I melted some chocolate, popped that into a piping bag, and then using a very classic jack-o'-lantern for inspiration, piped out some eyes, a nose, a mouth, and a little stem on some parchment paper. I let that set in the fridge, and then using the crack that had already formed in the pie as a starting point, carved out a few more pumpkin curves. I then constructed my chocolate jack-o'-lantern face, piped on some green whipped cream leaves, and that was the finished pie. Seriously, so cute. I'm so happy with how this turned out. Now you can't have pumpkin pie without whipped cream, so I mixed up a batch of that real fast, cut out a slice of pie. Not gonna lie, I was a little sad to have to ruin the cuteness. Topped the slice with a generous dollop of whipped cream. And just like that, had myself a perfect slice of seasonal pie. I really love doing this bake this week and having the opportunity to share this family tradition that connects me to my grandfather, even though it's something that I never actually got to share with him as he passed away before I was born.
I probably couldn't eat pumpkin all year round, but boy do I love it when fall hits. The perfect balance of pumpkin and spices. Got a nice, thin, baked crust. I know not everyone eats pumpkin pie on Halloween, but maybe you should give it a try. I'd say this autumn week bake was absolutely a success, and I'll see you back next week for dessert week.